Welcome to the Lenguillot podcast, a podcast about life, leadership, and money matters. Our guest today is Jorge Contreras. Jorge is a law professor at the University of Utah, where he writes and teaches about intellectual property law and science policy. Today, we will approach the following question. Does a corporation have the legal right to own the genetic code inside all of us? Jorge is the author of the book, The Genome Defense, Inside the Epic Legal Battle to Determine Who Owns Your DNA. Jorge, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
So, Jorge, the first question is, can you tell us a little bit about your background? You are a law professor. I wonder how you got to that position. Is this, you always wanted to study law, or you got there by some accident of nature?
Yes, as with so many things in life, coincidence and accident played a very big part. I was a student in college of engineering. I was an electrical engineer and had always intended to become an engineer in my profession. But one summer, I had a summer job in a program at AT&T Bell Laboratories in New Jersey, which is a big US research laboratory. And for some unknown reason, I was placed in the patent department of AT&T. All of the other summer students were in some engineering group, but I was in the patent department. And I actually liked it a lot, it turned out. It was very interesting, and I realized that as an engineer, I could spend 2 or 3 years working on the very same project day after day, or as a lawyer, I could deal with technology cases, but see many of them, a little taste of various ones. And so that persuaded me that law school is maybe the thing for me. And I did go to law school, and I specialized in patents, and that's the story.
And could you just, in case one or two persons doesn't know the exact definition of patent, can you tell us what is a patent?
Sure. So a patent is a government right that it gives to an inventor. Every country has patents, Canada, US, all the European countries, everyone has patents. They give the inventor the exclusive right to use an invention for 20 years from when they apply for the patent. And it usually takes 2 or 3 years to get the patent from the government.
And some critics says that 20 years may be too long. I wonder where you stand in that on that question.
Yes, well, some say too long, some say too short. We have the problem with the patent system, and there are a number of problems. One problem is it is one size fits all, right? And so you have some areas like software where the technology changes every 3 years. It's a new generation, and these patents still last for 20 years, which creates a very strange situations. In other industries, they move much more slowly. Some say that the drug process takes very long. It takes 10 years to get approval from the regulators. And so by then, half of your patent is already gone. And so they say it should be longer.
Some corporations like Coca-Cola, for example, decided never to patent their secret, and it's a secret, it's a professional secret. So I wonder if this is an option that some corporations who don't want to share their patents, they are opting for doing. We just have this industrial secret, and we are just not going to share it with the world.
Yes, and many companies use these two things in combination. The trade secret, like the Coca-Cola, that's very valuable. But the weakness of a trade secret is it does not stop somebody from creating it independently, right? So if somebody figures out how to make Coca-Cola on their own, Coca-Cola can't stop them. So a patent can, right? A patent, even if you invent something completely independently, my patent can stop you. So they work together.
Right. Okay. Well, I am an investor, and in my investment journey, I was looking for dividend paying stocks. And I found this category of corporations called tenderly patent trolls, which a lot of people criticize because they say they don't add much to society. They just buy a patent and then they troll anyone who uses them. I wonder if you have any opinion about patent trolls.
Yes, there are a lot of opinions about these entities. So, I mean, the basic idea that enforcing a patent in court, I mean, that's perfectly legal. And any company can enforce their patent. That's why we give them a patent. Sometimes a company may not want to enforce a patent itself. Maybe it's a university, maybe it has strategic relationships, so it can sell that patent to a company that is willing to enforce it. And that is also okay under the law. Where the patent trolls, as we know them, start to create problems is they generally have a reputation of asserting patents that are old, of very indefinite quality, and that have claims that could be very broad. So this is a podcast, and so you may remember a few years ago, there was an issue with a patent troll asserting a patent against every podcaster, every radio station, every podcast producer. And the patent, it was a patent that they got. It was an old patent. It covered the guy's actual business was sending audio cassette tapes by mail to people to listen to, and then they send them back like a lending library for audio cassette tapes. But because the patent was written very broadly, it covered any delivery of information, temporarily via electronic means, and they interpreted it to cover podcasting. So this is a problem.
Yeah. Okay. Then, okay, let's move to the subject of the book. How is it that you became interested in this subject, the genome defense?
Oh, so this is a subject that I have followed for a long time. I practiced as a lawyer for some years before I became a law professor, and in my practice, I did a lot in the biotechnology and pharmaceutical area. And so the patents that are covered in this book are two patents covering two genes that we all have called BRCA1 and 2. And there's a company that had patents on these genes. And this was pretty well known in the industry, in a very specialized industry, right? I wrote the book because not too many people outside of this industry ever heard of this. But the patents were well known, and the criticism of this company was also fairly well known for charging a high price to run diagnostic tests on these genes.
Okay, so as I understand it, I mean, the company had a patent on a segment of our DNA, and then was charging other companies for using this. I'm not sorry. I think I'm stumbling upon my own words. Can you tell us what's the case?
Yeah, no, of course. So as I mentioned at the beginning, a patent gives its owner the exclusive right to be the one to use that invention in the entire country, in this case, the United States. And so what does that mean? So we can talk about this, but when you patent a human gene, right, we treat that gene then like a new substance, like a new type of plastic or a new metallic alloy that you invented. And so anything you want to make with that thing, the patent owner controls. So in this case, the patent owner, the owner of the BRCA genes, they did not allow others to use the genes, except very limited, right? They became the only company that could test women to see if they had certain mutations in these genes. And these mutations give a very strong signal that whether you will or will not get breast cancer and ovarian cancer. So they were the only company in the country who could perform this test. And then they charged a high amount for this test, right? Over $3,000. in a way that was not really covered by many insurance policies, at least at the beginning. So the test was unaffordable to many, many women.
Well, your book is a genre called narrative nonfiction. Can you tell us more about this type of writing?
Yes, yes. So, I'm a law professor, and I write articles for the academic journals and so forth. And this case, which was heard by the US Supreme Court in 2019, was a well-known case among experts. Many articles have been written about it. I've written 2 articles myself about the case. But as you know, very few people outside of the experts read these articles and know the academic literature. And this case I felt was very important, important for everybody to understand how ownership occurs around our DNA, and this case in which the ACLU challenged those patents. And so I wanted to write it in a way that ordinary people could understand. And it's a story. It's a complicated story, but it's a story about people who bring a lawsuit against the odds, very much are fighting a large industry, very big and powerful law firms, but they fight, they go all the way to the US Supreme Court, and a lot of things happen along the way. And this to me seemed like a wonderful story. Well, it's a terrible story because people were being denied access to testing that could save their lives. But the characters involved, the people involved, really made a fascinating story, and a story that I thought a general readership could understand and appreciate.
Yes, as I was reading the book, I was going back into my Wikipedia page and just finding out the background of almost every one of the characters, and it's just amazing to see not only what is shared in the book, but also the things that they have gone on to do after the story. But talking about characters, can you then highlight who are the main characters in this book?
Well, there are a lot of heroes and main characters, but most of the action follows the ACLU team as they bring this case, as they first think about whether they can bring this case, and then they bring it and fight it all the way to the Supreme Court. And so the lawyer who is the thread through all of this is named Chris Hansen, who was a senior litigator. He had been 30 years with the ACLU when this book starts, and had done some very prominent cases around school desegregation and mental health facilities and online pornography, many of the things that the ACLU cares about. But of course, he had no background with patents. Really, nobody at the ACLU did. This is not their type of case. They are a civil rights organization. But in 2003, they hired a young woman named Tanya Simoncelli to be their science advisor. And they never had one of these before. And she knew about a lot of scientific issues around biology and genetics, DNA fingerprinting and the, 23andMe, like consumer genetic tests and brain imaging, all of these science issues. And one of them was gene patenting, which she had known about from her studies. But she was not a lawyer. And so she ends up talking with Chris Hansen, asking him how could they maybe bring a lawsuit that might do something about this. And at first he doesn't believe her. He says, no, it's not even possible. You must be wrong, because you're not a lawyer. You must not understand what this is about. And she's not wrong. She's right. And she finally convinces him, and they decide they will bring a lawsuit. But it takes a long time. It takes 4 years for them to convince the rest of the ACLU that this is a wise suit, a wise cause for the organization to be behind. They find 20 different plaintiffs, people who were injured by these patents, the medical associations, activist groups, and individual patients, women who were not able to be tested, who did contract cancer, and who claimed to be injured.
And the main defendant is?
Well, so the main defendant is a company called Myriad
Myriad,
Genetics,
right.
which actually comes out of the University of Utah. The scientists at University of Utah, which is my employer now. It wasn't when I started this book, but I do work here now. But thanks to academic freedom, I am perfectly allowed to say anything I want about the history of this case. So the university and the company really is the main defendant. But the United States government, the patent office, also plays a role in all of this. And the government and the people in the government have a surprising role in this case as it moves along.
Well, this is something that I don't understand in so many of these big cases where so much money and intellectual property is at stake. Why wouldn't this company, Myriad Genetics, write a big check to everyone and tell them to shut up and go home?
Well, the ACLU was not willing to settle this case. The ACLU, they found the idea of patenting human genes to be wrong and something that they should correct. And so Myriad Genetics was only one company out of hundreds of companies that owned patents on different genes. They picked the defendant who they thought would be the one most likely to, to present a good case for them. But they could have settled with only Myriad, but Myriad's patents would have survived, and all the other patents would have survived. Wow. Their goal was to end this practice in the United States completely.
Okay, well, we will leave it to the listeners to find out. I mean, they can,
no
they can just ask Google and they will have the answer right away. But we will leave it to the curiosity of the leaders of the listeners. Okay, so what is the future of DNA now? I guess is public information, is public domain.
Yes. So the Human Genome Project, which ended in the early 2000s, completed the sequence of the entire human genome. And the basic sequence that makes us human is now known. But there are an unlimited number of variants and mutations that we continue to discover. This case is important because it prevents those new variants that we discover every year from also becoming the property of a particular company. This becomes especially important in the era of gene editing, this new technology that is being developed that could allow us to alter the DNA inside of our cells to cure disease or avoid other physical defects and problems. If those edits come from nature, they're observed in other people, then they can not be patented, which again creates, I think, a much more open playing field to have medical advancement.
Okay, looking into the future, to your opinion, I know it's just as random as watching a science fiction movie, but what is the future of DNA editing? Are we going to be able to design ourselves and say, oh, I would like to have a kid that has these characteristics and then go to the lab and create it?
It's, we're not there yet, of course, but that's certainly possible. I mean, I think the first applications will be slightly more sophisticated versions of what we have today, where we can already select embryos based on genetic diseases that certain embryos might have, and to avoid having children that have serious genetic diseases. The next step will probably be to cure other types of diseases, especially cancer, but other types of diseases that relate to our genetics. Beyond that, the ethical debates get much more heated, right? Then you are in the world of science fiction with the X-Men, and can you create mutations that do all kinds of crazy things? And we're very far, of course, from anything like that. But things like athletic ability, higher intelligence, these sorts of things, there's some suggestion that there may be genetic bases for these. And so someday the possibility of enhancing those types of characteristics in embryos and unborn fetuses. And there's a big debate about whether that should ever be done, whether that research should ever even be pursued, or whether this is just going to happen and we'll need to adapt as well as we can to it.
Well, I have to tell you, one of the things that I like about the book is as you are narrating the dialogue between the different characters, you open little parentheses and explains the science behind it. And, it's just for me who doesn't know much about science, I found it like a reading an upgraded version of a science textbook. It's just like all this science, but with a story and real life characters behind it, and the consequences that one decision or the other one could have in our life. So I truly appreciate the book. I wonder if you could tell us one more time the title of the book and where can the listeners follow the work that you do.
Absolutely. So the book is called The Genome Defense. Inside the epic legal battle to determine who owns your DNA. There's a website for the book, genomedefense.org, that has links, of course, to Amazon and booksellers and Audible. It's an audiobook as well as regular book and ebook. The website, genomedefense.org, for those who are extra curious, also has a lot of the original documents from the case. Everything from the patents themselves, if you're curious what those look like, to the cease and desist letters that Myriad sent, to the transcripts of the arguments in court. So for students maybe who are interested in what it would be like to be a lawyer in one of these cases, you can see all of that as well.
Jorge, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.